Welcome back, everyone. This is Luciano for the Business English podcast featuring Pablo as well. Glad to have you here. Well, today we're going to talk about a very important topic, feedback. How can we give feedback to people around us and specifically at work? So when we are discussing this topic, feedback, it is important to have a framework, a step by step you can use so you are clear in your speech and there is no room for doubts or for misunderstandings. And a great starting point for this subject is a book called Nonviolent Communication. It is a book that was written by Marshall Rosenberg, and he mediated many situations throughout his life in very high levels as well. He mediated disputes between nations. So he's a great psychologist. He contributed a lot to his field. And today we're going to reveal his book and try to apply the principles and these step by steps in our conversation and how we can use the nonviolent communication in our favor.
That's right. It's a pretty great book. We have already recommended it, including in our most recent episode. It's going to teach you one or two things, for not to say a lot of things, about how to request, how to express your feelings, and of course, how to use reason, how to be reasonable when expressing yourself. It's a great book. We highly recommend it. We're going to talk about it today, some pivotal points, but it's a great recommendation indeed.
Awesome. So the first topic we will cover is why this skill matters. So I will share a little bit of my point of view, and then Pablo is more than welcome to contribute too. And I see that this skill matters because when you have a step by step in mind, you know exactly what to do. You already have a template, a model. So, for talking about myself, I'm very direct. I tend to be direct. So, not a lot of people, not everyone is used to that. Not everyone is likes to receive direct information. So, sometimes at least in the past, I struggled more with it. And after I learned these four steps, that is the framework called nonviolent communication, my life became so much easier when talking to other coworkers here at YouAble and even in my personal life, family, other people around me. So the steps here will help you really you will be able to share what you really mean, your intentions, because sometimes we won't have the best words available. But when we have this plan, it will guide you throughout your thinking and it will support you in being your best version.
Indeed, and it's there's something here that calls my attention that it says even though giving feedback in the wrong way may cause problems, not giving feedback also create these problems, this confusion. So if going through this is a challenge for you after learning about this book, it should become less challenging as it was for Luciano and that is as it was for me as well.
Exactly. And let's jump right into it. The four steps of nonviolent communication are number one, observation. You're going to focus on what happened. It's really easy for me, and I see for a lot of people to judge, to exaggerate, because we sometimes are emotional, and we are emotional human beings. And especially after the event, when it's fresh in our minds, it's easy to exaggerate or judge other people. So keep that in mind. The first step is observation and try to focus on what really happened. Pablo, can you give us an example of a fact, of an observation that is focused more on the fact?
Absolutely. So, for example, if you were in a meeting, right, and you have been interrupted in a way that didn't feel polite, didn't feel assertive, you could start by stating what you observed from the situation. For instance, in yesterday's meeting, you interrupted me twice while I was speaking. So you were expressing the fact, just that, without including your emotions on it.
Exactly. In this situation Pablo shared, he was talking, that was the fact, and then the other person interrupted him. So those are only facts. If I told
Exactly.
Pablo, Pablo, you are you are always doing that to me. I don't like it. I hate when you interrupt me. So you can see that I'm bringing a lot of feelings, not really good feelings. You're kind of exaggerating the situation. So sometimes it's just a matter of putting the facts out, helping the person having a clear picture of what happened. And then, after you say the fact, then it is a good moment to share your feelings. That's step number two. How did you feel? Because empathy is not easy. It's easier said than done to have empathy, to think about the other person's point of view. So when you share your feelings, you express how that fact made you feel, and oftentimes it won't be comfortable. So that's why it is so important to share your feelings so the other person knows what's going on in your mind. Because especially in this online setting, we don't have access to all of information. So maybe during the meeting, when the person interrupted you, you are like shaking your hands, you're moving your feet, but here, I can only see your face. So it's really hard to have those cues, those hints. So, Pablo, can you give us an example of how you felt after the person interrupted you?
Absolutely. It's an important thing to mention that if you start with your feelings, let's suppose that you start by saying how you felt. Oh, I'd like to talk to you because I felt frustrated and disrespected. What is the first question that the listener of this message will ask you? Why? So it's important that you start with the fact, so there are no details to be that are not clear. So you can be extremely clear. So after explaining that, oh, you have interrupted me twice while I was speaking, now you go to the feeling and say, I felt frustrated and a bit disrespected. So I said how I felt exactly. After, remember, always reflect and choose correctly the words that will actually demonstrate how you actually felt.
Yes, and I may even be redundant sometimes, but I will focus on the most important themes within this subject. Because when you're sharing your feelings, you did one great thing now, Pablo, that is you shared your feelings. You didn't tell the person you disrespected me. You are just sharing what you felt.
Yeah, no
So what
accusations.
exactly, no judgment. That's great. And step number three is the need, what you need. So after you share the observation, the facts, you shared how you felt, what is the person is going to do with that information? So you can share your needs, what you would like to happen in future scenarios. So in order to not be interrupted, you can ask, you can tell the person your needs. And well, can you give us an example, Pablo?
Absolutely. So, right after the first step, which is observation, and the second step, which is feeling, you're going to express what you need by saying, I need to feel heard and respected during team discussions. So, you are already given a direction of what you need, and it guides expectation towards what you expect.
The main idea is exactly that. The need, the third step, is simple. It's quite simple. Just share your need, what you wanted to happen. So you need to feel heard. This is very personal. You can see that when we use these four steps so far, including the next step, we are using a lot of I statements. You're talking about yourself because the other person here, this template will help you share your point of view and be understood at work. And after you share your needs, you will make a request. Because if you say what you want, that's okay. And you can make a deal, you can create a commitment with the other person. So, how can you do that? I find it really easy to do it when you ask a question, when you really hear the other person saying yes. For example, in the request part, you can say exactly what you want for the other person. When the next situation happens, how is the person supposed to act, to behave? Pablo, can you give us an example of a request?
Absolutely. So, by being the clearest possible, by being by speaking in the clearest way, you could say something like this: would you be open to letting me finish my point next time before responding?
Exactly. Here, you're being very clear about what needs to be done, and then you expect a yes or a no. And don't expect the person to be 100% in the next time it happens. Maybe the other person forgot about it. There are a million things going on in their lives. So you can even restate the request afterward. For example, if you have a meeting with this person again next week and the person does that again, you can talk to the person and say, okay, do you remember what we talked about? Do you remember my request? And you agreed to that. So it is not only in your mind, you're making a commitment with the other person. And after the person has already agreed to that, it will become easier and easier to manage the situation. And here you're not forcing something, you're not imposing your ideas. You're asking a question. Is it possible or not? And if the person tells you, your request is kind of off, there will be a need for adjustments. But it's better to adjust your request with the person than saying nothing, being quiet. When you are quiet, that same situation will happen over and over again, which is not great. So keep that in mind, try to make a commitment, ask questions, and then I'm sure your communication, your problem solving skills will be great. And also your communication will improve drastically.
Sometimes we let our emotions get in the way of our reason, which means we don't think straight on the possibilities of uh, finding a halfway, or finding a common point of interest of both parts. So we either think it's yes or no, it's black or white, it's one or another, and it's not. There's always an agreement to reach, right? And the best way of doing it is by following exactly the guidelines you have showed us, which is not sounding accusatory, using I statements, expressing clearly what happened, what you need, how do you feel, and what do you expect, what is your request for the next step. So it requires thinking, right? So getting a little bit ahead of myself, it's not easy to do it, especially first time. So it's a learning curve, right? Try again and again, think again and again. Thinking is extremely important so you can communicate the best way possible.
Exactly. Don't expect to be perfect in the first time. And oftentimes it will be uncomfortable because you're sharing a feedback. Maybe you don't have a lot of contact with that person. So, however, just go for it and try it out. You can try with people that you're more familiar with at first, and then you can expand as you're more used to the framework. You can try that with other people. And when it comes to using the nonviolent communication at work, I will give you an example now just to wrap up this section of with the template. We're going to cover a feedback. I'm going to give you a feedback, Pablo, and then you're going to help me with the response. So how can you respond when people give you feedback? Because now so far we talked about how you can give feedback, and now you will help us with how you can respond to that as well. So let's see the first example here. When you're giving feedback to a colleague, for instance, Pablo, during the last presentation, I noticed that the visuals weren't ready on time. That's the observation. It wasn't ready on time. I'm not saying that it was bad or anything. And how did I feel? I felt a bit stressed because I need reliable support to meet deadlines. That's what I need. I need support to meet the deadlines. When that deadlines pass and we didn't achieve that activity, we didn't finish it, it's really bad for us. So what's the request? Next time, you will confirm with me a day in advance that the materials are finalized. Can you do that for me? That's the request. And then it's easy. It's a yes or a no situation. You painted clearly the picture in the person's mind. And then, Pablo, how could you respond to that?
Amazing. So I'm going to give you an example on how to answer that in a graceful way, because receiving the feedback must not be the reception of a feedback must not be reactive. So it's important to acknowledge, to recognize the how difficult it was. So I would start with thanks for sharing that. Well, that was an observation just itself. Thanks for sharing that. And then, we could merge observation and feeling into one single sentence, and I could say something like this: I understand you felt overwhelmed and I didn't respond quickly. So, acknowledging, recognizing observation, I understand you felt overwhelmed and I didn't respond quickly. Right after, I say, I'll make sure to set clearer expectations about response time going forward. Okay, so in this case, I'm acknowledging again, recognizing your need, and explaining what will be my action. Well, I don't have a request, so my final phrase won't be a request, but an action, right? I'm redirecting my focus from the problem to the solution by agreeing with what has been requested.
Exactly. The next steps. I made you a request, and then we're already talking about next steps. And
Yes.
while you're receiving the feedback, as you mentioned, it is important to acknowledge what the other person said. So it's not only listening to the feedback, but receiving it. It's different. When you receive the feedback, you show the person that you understood it. And there's no better way to do it than rephrasing what the other person said. You don't need to rephrase everything. You don't need to use exactly the words they used, but just confirm what they said. Just do it and you will be fine. And some tips. And moving forward, there are some tips that you can use to apply the nonviolent communication at work. So focus on facts and don't blame anyone. We already talked a lot about it. Own your emotions. Own your emotions means share your feelings. Sometimes it is not easy to do that, especially at work, being open, vulnerable. However, it is a step, a fundamental step. Make requests and not demands. So questions are easier to show show the other person that you're not requiring, you're not demanding things from them. Nobody likes that. And finally, be empathetic when receiving feedback. Appreciate the time the person took to tell you something. As Pablo said, thanks for thanks for sharing that. Thanks for the feedback. I appreciate your support. And then if you don't understand, if the other person may not communicate in the best words as well. They may be learning the same framework you are. So be empathetic. If you don't understand it at first, you can ask questions like, "Oh, Pablo, can you help me understand better what bothered you? Can you help me understand what the next steps are? It's not so clear at the moment. I really understand your point of view. I want to improve and I need your help. Let's do it together." And then you change the situation that could be not so good, not so positive in the long run, and you change it that for a completely better and highly positive outcome. So, Pablo, can you share with us the mission for the week, what our listeners are supposed to do?
Absolutely. So, as we always request you, remember, we don't demand, we request. That's already something
Exactly.
to put in practice, right? So, what we usually request you, we usually advise you to practice, right? To put it in action. So try using it in a real situation in real life. So how can you do that? The first thing is thinking of someone that you need to give feedback to, or someone you already gave a feedback, or sorry, someone who gave you a feedback, right? So think of this person, think of the most recent situation, and I would like you to write a short nonviolent communication style message using the four steps that we have presented you: observation, feeling, need, and request. You write this message following these four steps and directed to someone that you need to give feedback, or someone that gave you feedback. What are you going to do with this short message you have written? You're going to practice by singing out loud with calm and professional tone. And remember, reflexive. Always think about what happened. Always reflect what were actually your feelings and what caused these feelings. When you do it, you were able to follow a message that is true to what you actually felt, plus following the NVC template, and of course, applying it in real life in a future opportunity. It's going to happen. It's life. Constructive feedbacks are not always the easiest conversation, but are the ones that make us stronger at the end. So get yourself ready for it, and you will always be a good professional.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Pablo, for your support in this podcast. Just a reminder, everyone, apply these principles right away and thank me later. I will just say that. I appreciate your time and attention. I'm sure that nonviolent communication will help you a lot. I highly suggest you taking a look at the books Marshall Rosenberg wrote, and there are two main books. One with an orange cover and one with a white cover. Both of them are explaining nonviolent communication. However, the book with the white cover is easier to get started with. So those are the two main books he wrote, and the one with the white cover is a great starting point if you want to read that in English. Well, that's it for today for the Business English podcast for this week. We're finishing this week about feedback. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and have a great week.
Thank you very much, Luciano. Thank you, dear listeners. See you in the next episode.